Here's Dr. Michael Salla.
Secret meetings near Jupiter decide the future of our solar system? 3 months before the collapse of Nazi Germany during World War II, the three great Allied powers, the USA, the Soviet Union, and Great Britain, met at Yalta on the Crimean Peninsula to discuss the post-war order of Europe that would be based on the principle of national self-determination. According to a former professional archaeologist and contactee, Elena Danaan, a similar set of meetings have just concluded near the planet Jupiter to discuss the new order in our solar system that will emerge with the impending military collapse of the Dark Fleet and its draconian, Orion, deep state and corporate allies. She says the Galactic Federation of Worlds met recently with the representatives of the Earth Alliance and an alliance of secret space programs in a set of 12 meetings to discuss the new order in our solar system. It's worth pointing out that the existence of a galactic federation was recently acknowledged by the founder of Israel's space program, Professor/General Haim Eshed, and he further added that it was working directly with the US presidential administration of Donald Trump. Furthermore, I've discussed the escalating military conflict between the Galactic Federation of Worlds with rival space coalitions, the Dark Fleet, Draconian Empire, and Orion Alliance in a prior article distinguishing between different galactic associations and their historical interactions. Elena contacted me on July 17 with the dramatic news of the meetings that had been completed near Jupiter and the different nations that were involved through their respective space programs. She said the final meeting had concluded only a day earlier, with an agreement being reached that would establish a multinational space alliance between the major Earth nations under US leadership. This is what Elena wrote in her first email. Quote, "Agreements have been passed on Jupiter yesterday between the different progressive galactic coalitions and Terran military forces to share the use and the protection of this star system regarding to economic and military domains in preparation for the future. Territories of action have been set. Terran humans are officially taking ownership of their system. The US was the lead representative in these series of meetings. They were chosen by the Galactic Federation of Worlds because of their abilities, resources and goals, best able to guarantee a sustainable and glorious future for off-world humankind. Long years of secret collaboration with the nations of Terra have come to completion. But we still need to bring closure to this war for the liberation of this system. Until then, we will need to work hard, and when this day comes, we will all be ready to step into a new era of fraternity and cooperation together." End quote. What corroborates Elena's remarkable claims here are the recent signings of the Artemis Accords among countries with functioning space programs. These are bilateral accords negotiated between spacefaring nations and the United States that were first signed on October 13, 2020 between the US and 7 nations: Australia, Canada, Italy, Japan, Luxembourg, United Arab Emirates and the United Kingdom. Since the launch of the Artemis Accords, Brazil, South Korea, New Zealand and Ukraine have all subsequently signed the accords. Another major spacefaring nation, India, is also considering joining the Artemis Accords. It's worth emphasizing that the accords result from several years of negotiations between the US and other nations that began in earnest during the Trump administration and continue under the current Biden administration. What the Artemis Accords have created is the founding principles of a multinational space alliance that will be established under US leadership. The Accords make possible the pursuit of joint economic and scientific activities in space, along with a multinational military alliance that will protect these activities through safety zones, as I have discussed previously. The recent signing and expansion of the Artemis Accords, after several years of negotiations, closely matches what Elena claims has just happened near Jupiter, where the Galactic Federation and other progressive space alliances, such as the Andromeda Council, have recently reached agreements. To help clarify what had just happened, Elena sent me a second email on July 17 with additional information she had received about the meetings from her primary extraterrestrial contact, Thorhan Eredyan. She has earlier explained that she receives regular communications through a brain implant, which had been repurposed from an alien abduction that occurred when she was 9 years old and from which she had been rescued by Thorhan and his Federation companions. I highly recommend reading her book, A Gift from the Stars, to learn about her background and continued communications with Thorhan. Elena was told, quote, Thorhan wasn't part of these meetings. He was just part of the escort for the representatives of the Galactic Federation of Worlds, and he stayed in orbit of Jupiter. But he knows this. There was a series of meetings, and this had been going on for a while. There were 12 meetings in total, first occurring among specific groups separately, and then these last days, 3 big meetings. The first gathering everyone, the second a selected group, and the third the final agreements with the leading selected group. Each group was made of Space Force military officials and progressive corporations' CEOs. So a delegation of the Galactic Federation of Worlds has been auditing separately different Earth representatives, military officials responsible for space forces, as well as heads of certain progressive corporations to determine safety zones and who would serve best the interests of the many. End quote. It's very significant that Elena used the term safety zones to describe the areas of multinational space cooperation and what served the interests of most nations. This is identical to the language used in the Artemis Accords, something she was not familiar with prior to our communications. It's also very important to point out that major nations have been recently forming space commands, where their respective military forces are increasingly working together in space-related issues. Britain in 2021, Germany in 2021, Italy in 2021, and Australia in 2022 have all recently joined the US, France, Russia, and China in setting up space commands for integrating their military activities in space. Most significantly, in October 2020, NATO set up a space centre that will run all its space operations out of Ramstein Air Base in Germany. All these recent military developments concerning outer space corroborate Elena's remarkable claims. Her second email went on as follows, quote, The Galactic Federation of Worlds only wants to work with a unified global civilization, not with a clutter of different rival space forces playing power games. Thorhan said that there are actually 14 countries involved in space programs who were represented there, but a top 6 have programs recognized by the Galactic Federation of Worlds as most progressive and durable, and fit to join forces with them. The 8 others were just in for commercial reasons benefiting the many. Thorhan was also speaking about a horizontal coalition of these top 6 coming up as a unified space department. Would we be witnessing, as you said it, Michael, the birth of Starfleet? End quote. It's understandable why the Galactic Federation of Worlds would be insisting on a unified global civilization that partners with it in space affairs rather than the current situation of competing spacefaring nations with conflicting agendas. The formation of an alliance of spacefaring nations working within a unified command structure makes much sense. Based on current membership of the Artemis Accords, it can be guessed that the 6 countries identified as the most progressive and durable would be the United States, France, Britain, Germany, Japan, and either Italy or Australia, all of which have space commands either functioning or in process of being launched. In my book, Space Force, Our Star Trek Future, published in 2021, I explain how the multinational space alliance being currently created under US leadership is the antecedent of a future Starfleet, not unlike that envisaged by Gene Roddenberry. In fact, I present evidence that Roddenberry's Starfleet was modelled on a future multinational space coalition that he was clandestinely briefed about in the 1960s. The other 8 nations participating in the Jupiter meetings would be drawn from Artemis Accord members or other nations. This leads to the critical question of where do China and Russia fit into this emerging multinational space alliance collaborating directly with the Galactic Federation and other positive space organizations. Elena's message from Thorhan provides us with an answer. Quote, Thorhan showed me also the only visual memory he had of these events, viewed from his ship, 3 ovoid crafts leaving the orbit of Jupiter after the second of this series of 3 ultimate meetings. Each craft had Earth military delegates on board, by country. He didn't tell me what the third was, but 2 of them were carrying Chinese and Russian officials, and he was told that both these crowds were very unhappy. He said that the USA won the responsibility to organize the new Earth's United Space Coalition. End quote. What corroborates Elena's information here is that no other spacefaring nation has joined China and Russia in their proposed International Lunar Research Station initiative launched with their bilateral agreement reached in June 2021. Only the US has succeeded in creating a multinational space coalition through the Artemis Accords, which Russia declined to join since it was, quote, too US-centric, end quote, and China was excluded from joining due to its continued theft of intellectual property and industrial espionage. Consequently, it does not come as a great surprise that Chinese and Russian delegations were very unhappy with the agreements reached near Jupiter. In addition to the circumstantial evidence presented so far that corroborates Elena's claims, we need to further consider whether it's feasible that a Yalta-like set of meetings and agreements have just been reached. Yalta clearly created a precedent that even in the midst of savage fighting during the final 3 months of World War II, the Allied powers were already actively planning for a post-war order free of Nazism. We appear to be in a very similar situation right now, with a covert war being fought on Earth, the Moon and Mars, wherever the Dark Fleet, the Draconian Empire, and Orion Alliance have established bases or assets. These bases were created as far back as the 1940s because of agreements reached with Nazi Germany and have since expanded, with major multinational corporations secretly building the space assets for different customers, the Dark Fleet, Orion Alliance, etc. Significantly, these corporations have built privately run secret space programs themselves and have become space powers in their own right. According to earlier information released by Elena, these Dark Fleet Draco Orion bases have come under attack and are at various points of liberation. This is consistent with claims by a number of insiders that the Dark Fleet and their corporate allies have been cut off from their interstellar partners, which had led to dwindling resources and significant defections. It also matches with data released by remote viewers associated with the Farsight Institute discussing the current exopolitical situation. In conclusion, with the continuing global blackout of information concerning extraterrestrial affairs, or exopolitics, on Earth and in deep space, it's very difficult to confirm Elena Danaan's startling information that secret meetings and agreements are occurring in space, involving Earth's major space powers and corporations. Nevertheless, Her latest information is supported by much circumstantial evidence, what other secret space program insiders have been recently claiming, and remote viewing data. While this doesn't confirm her remarkable claims, it does make them worth investigating further for those wanting to know what is currently happening in deep space right now. This has been Dr. Michael Salla with Exopolitics Today.